Now, if you look at this, let's just fast forward to nowadays. We're here one way or the other, okay? So if there's a supreme being that really exists, would people have observed it throughout time or not? So science is observation, right? That is the definition of science. That's what it is. Well, like over 90% of the people who have existed on the earth have collective witness of that observation. That something more is going on than meets the eye. Something put us here. That's been their observation throughout all time. As far as since we've been humans, okay? And something definitely made us. And they have different languages, they have different names, but and you can look at the different perspectives of the different religious cultures, but it's interesting how similar some of them stories are. They're from different perspectives. You go to Zoroastrianism, you go to some of the ancient mythology, or you go to like a Native American mythology, or any of the Native mythologies, or the Bible, or any of the other different religious traditions, and they all have a kind of similar story that something made us, put us on this planet that it also made, and is like an experiment. Is like refining the species, trying to look for something more special. Okay? If I was a super awesome scientist and I wanted to create a species that was even more awesome, okay, I would not only create this thing materially and give it the brain, but you could place it on a planet, let it reproduce, and then you could test it to see the quality. And then by either passing or failing, whatever test that might be, you'll have narrowed in on a certain slice of the gene pool, if you will. Or if you want to look at it spiritually, you can look at it that way. It's a test. Life is a test. We are being refined somehow. There is some reason why we're here. We're trying to figure it out. What is that reason? Are we going to preserve the continuation of our species? Are we going to love people and help people, which is helpful to the continuation of the species, which by biological definitions makes us more fit, okay? If you look at the evolutionary definition of fitness, okay, it's the ability to preserve the species, to continue your gene pool frequency over time, okay? Not only by producing children, but by preserving the gene pool frequency that you exist from, like continuing your part of the species onward, whether that be downloading information, passing on of like useful qualities, and producing children, all those things, So it could all be, boiled down to preserving the tribe and who you are, okay? Now the contrary to that whole deal would be death, and people who are selfish, and people who only want to advance themselves at the sacrifice of everyone else. Everyone else, screw them. That's not important. I'm important. That's the contrary deal. Now, that leads to death of the species. So maybe that's the test, right? Well, if you ask all your different people that have existed on Earth, that's kind of the general direction they go with their story of why we're here and what we're doing here. If you look back, it's almost as if like someone had talked to them at one point from up there and told them what the deal was, because they all kind of have the same story. Now, granted, they all have perversions of that story, or they add or embellish certain parts, or they get certain parts screwed around, or they're coming from different perspectives, right? Because the bad guys in that story and the good guys from that story are going to have different perspectives, obviously. Hence your different flavors of religious tradition, right? But all that being said, I think that most reasonable people could agree that there's ample evidence that that's kind of what's going on. Now you say, well, it's the spiritual stuff, right? So how can a guy be spiritual? That's crazy. We haven't seen it. I want to see it proven scientifically. I don't see spiritual stuff scientifically, therefore it don't exist. Dig this. Take a time machine. Let's say we have a time machine. Go back like 150 years and start explaining to the all-knowing scientists of the day radio waves. Tell them that there's these invisible things that fly through the air and communicate all this amazing things. People can talk to each other. Voices can appear. Music can come out of the heavens, radio waves, right? They'd think you're crazy, and they would laugh you out of their university, and they'd kick you out, and they'd say, you're making stuff up. You're a witch. Burn them. If it was religious people, they'd burn you as a witch. If it was scientific people, they'd look down at you through their nose and say, oh, what an idiot, you know? That's what would happen. Okay. To scientifically observe certain things, you need special tools. We did eventually discover radio waves, but we needed special tools to do that, okay? So we required radios and things that emit radio waves that you can detect them. When you can actually observe it and reproduce those things for other people, and other people can observe them and test them, now you got scientific fact going on. Oh, now everyone today, now that we have the proper equipment, can observe radio waves and say, yep, it truly exists, okay? Now, when you're talking spiritual stuff, people have that same attitude they did have on the radio waves. Is it possible that maybe one day we'll get to see scientifically in a material universe even of what those crazy religious people might have been talking about? You see, everyone has claimed to have observed it in their history at some point. Something talked to someone at some point. And some people still are talking to people supposedly through their spirit stuff, right? What's going on there? Okay? Well, maybe, and this is just an hypothesis now, I'm not claiming this is the way it is. What if the instrument required, the high-tech instrument to detect spiritual information, was not a crude radio made out of copper and batteries and an antenna and little, you know, whatever, or like these crude, like a tape measure is not going to detect radio waves. That's not the proper tool, right? You know, a scale is not going to detect radio waves, but a radio will. What's the instrument or the equipment needed to detect the spiritual waves, or whatever you want to call it, okay? Maybe it's this. Maybe this is such a sensitive biochemical computer with all kinds of stuff that nobody still knows what it all is that instrument. There's a thing in the middle of your brain called the pineal gland. A lot of folks might talk about that deal. And when people pray or sing songs like I did at the beginning of the video there, that sucker lights up pretty good. It's emitting some kind of electromagnetic energy. They can detect it on brainwave scans and stuff. That thing lights up pretty good when people are doing that. Nobody really knows exactly what it's for, but you're emitting electromagnetic radiation out of your brain when you pray. Is it possible it could receive information coming in? Where is that guy anyways? Is he in the sky? Is he in an extra dimension that we are not really capable of seeing for some reason at this point? I mean, no, a lot of, physicists, they come up with theoretical physics sometimes, but a lot of guys think there's a fourth dimension, fifth dimension, and multiple dimensions. Who knows? Maybe it's in outer space. Wherever this other stuff is it possible that it communicates with us? You'd think that if something would build us and put us on this planet for the purpose of observing us and refining our species into something even more beautiful, that they would have a way of communicating with us, right? Yeah, okay. See, so what's going on there anyways? Think about it. Pretty interesting. So humans and everybody, have had this collective experience. Some people can quantify it scientifically better than others. Some can more just zero in on the actual third eye situation and claim that they've had spiritual experiences or whatever you want to call it. Some people have access to the original communications of humans, human observation on what we're talking about. And what I'm talking about there is the ancient writings. A lot of folks, there's the Bible. There's part of the Bible is the Torah. That's the first part, the first 5 books. Those are pretty interesting accounts of kind of what would explain a lot of that stuff. And you can look at the Hindus have their own version, which kind of sort of, overlaps, and all these different people have kind of a similar story. That someone created us once upon a time. It was a test. The test begun, people started getting the wrong answer, and the refinement process, the centrifuge of good versus evil started spinning. And the good and the evil started separating through the test of life on this planet. And all those different systems would agree that at some point that thing got real bad and they had to flush out the bad stuff like you would in a centrifuge after a certain point and further refine, okay? That would have been what most cultures refer to as like the flood judgment, okay? Most cultures refer to something that happened back in the day. You hear the stories of Atlantis sinking under the sea. I mean, that's the flood, okay? and the Bible talks about it. All different kinds of people. The Chinese write about it. The Hawaiians write about it. So people think it's crazy, but it's totally possible. And if you look at your geology, you can argue uniformitarianism versus catastrophism. And really, what you have is uniformitarianism, like slow, gradual processes account for all the geography we see. But could that be punctuated by a catastrophe to accelerate that process and account for a lot of the fault lines and mountains? See, it's all arguable. Who knows? But at any case, everyone's argued that, some kind of judgment occurred. And then the people have, again, started to further refine themselves more on this centrifuge of the life test, okay? And here we are today, approaching the next flush, maybe, or the next refinement stage. Who knows? So that's where I ended up at a certain point, and I thought, wow, that's really interesting, So I know that life is not an accident, something made us, and I highly suspect that it's a test, okay? And based on those suspicions, I start to interpret things. Now, this cannot be verified as fact, but the word faith is kind of what fills that gap. Scientists would call it scientific interpretation of facts. You can only observe something that's right in front of your eyes. Like, for example, if you want to theorize how stars form or whatever, that's all scientific interpretation. It's not actual observation, although some people claim some people observe. But you know what I'm saying. It's all interpretation. Religious people would call that faith. It's our interpretation of what we believe to be true based on a lot of real-life experiences throughout time, collectively and personally, okay? So faith and scientific interpretation are like kind of the same deal. So I don't see the big conflict there until you get on the details, and scientists and religious people argue about various details on things, and that's fine. I think that's what we're supposed to do to try to further refine the truth. But I'm trying to keep it simple. Yeah, real simple so far. But okay, so if you're in there this far, let's just go a little bit further. If you made it this far in the deal, let's go a little bit further.